Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the flickering lamplight of a Roman dining room, where the air hums with clinking goblets, murmured boasts, and the faint scent of roasted peacock. You're reclining on a cushioned couch, your toga itching slightly, surrounded by sharp-eyed guests sizing you up. Every bite, every gesture is a performance, and one wrong move could tank your reputation faster than a chariot crash. The Romans didn't just eat, they turned meals into a high-stakes game of power, where etiquette wasn't about taste, but control. You probably won't survive this social gauntlet unscathed, so brace yourself. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in the heart of Rome, around 100 CE, and dining isn't just dinner, it's a battlefield. The rules governing these feasts, called convivia, were stricter than a centurion's drill sergeant. Why? Because in a city where emperors could fall and senators schemed, meals were where alliances were forged and status was flaunted. The mainstream fact here is that Roman dining etiquette, laid out in texts like those of Juvenal, demanded precision. You reclined on your left elbow, ate with your right hand, and never, ever slurped your soup. Mess that up, and you're not just rude, you're signaling you don't belong. A quirky tidbit: some Romans believed spilling wine angered household gods, so they'd pour a few drops on the floor as an offering. Historians still argue whether these rules were about piety or just flexing social clout. You notice the room's layout first. The triclinium, that three-couch dining setup, isn't random. The host picks who lies where, and the closer you are to him, the more important you seem. You're on the low end tonight, stuck near a guy who smells like he bathed in garlic. The host, a smug patrician, lounges at the head, his gold rings glinting as he snaps for more wine. You're handed a plate of dormice. Yes, those little rodents, stuffed with herbs and honey. It's a delicacy, but your stomach churns. Refuse it, and you insult the host. Eat it, and you're proving your loyalty. That's the game. Every dish, every rule, screams power. The host isn't feeding you out of kindness. He's reminding you he's in charge. The etiquette feels suffocating. You can't lean too far back, or you're lazy. Sit too upright, and you're a try-hard. You mimic the others, pinching food with 2 fingers, avoiding the communal sauce bowl like it's cursed. A guy across the room laughs too loudly and gets a glare that could curdle milk. You realize these rules aren't about comfort. They're about keeping everyone in line. The powerful dictate the pace, and you're just trying to keep up. It's like a modern job interview, but with more lentils and fewer exit strategies. Joke 1. Ever wonder if Romans had a 5-second rule for dropped figs? Probably not. They just blame a slave. You're starting to see the bigger picture. Dining in Rome wasn't about the food. It was a mirror of the empire's obsession with order. Emperors like Nero threw feasts to dazzle allies, while senators used them to sniff out traitors. Even the poor followed watered-down versions of these rules at their tavern meals, hoping to seem respectable. You take a sip of watered wine, careful not to spill, and wonder how anyone relaxed in this pressure cooker. The guy next to you whispers about a senator who got exiled for eating with the wrong fork. Okay, maybe not a fork, but you get it. Power, not taste, ruled the table, and you're just a pawn in this edible chess match. You're still reclining in that Roman triclinium, the air thick with olive oil fumes and whispered gossip. The table before you isn't just a place to eat, it's a stage, and every guest is an actor playing their part. The host, lounging like he owns the Colosseum, flicks his fingers, and a slave scurries to refill his goblet. You notice how each guest's movements, delicate sips, precise bites, are calculated, screaming their status louder than any toga. The dining rules you're sweating to follow aren't about manners. They're a performance of power, where every gesture telegraphs who's on top. The mainstream fact is clear. Roman dining was a public display of hierarchy, as texts like Petronius's Satyricon show. Your position on the couch, the quality of your wine, even the size of your dormouse portion, all screamed your rank. A quirky tidbit: some hosts served fake food, like wooden eggs, to humiliate lower guests who dared expect equal treatment. Historians still argue whether this was cruel mockery or just rich guy humor. Either way, you're glad your plate's real, though the garum sauce smells like a fish's nightmare. You scan the room, picking up the choreography. The senator near the host gets prime cuts of boar, while you're stuck with chewy lentils. It's no accident. The dining table mirrors Rome's pecking order. Patricians at the top, plebeians scrambling, and you, a middling merchant, barely registering. You try to mimic the senator's wrist flick as he grabs an olive, but your elbow bumps a cup, earning a side-eye from a guy with a unibrow. You mutter an apology, but the damage is done. In Rome, clumsiness isn't just embarrassing. It's a sign you're out of your depth. Joke 1. Bet they'd exile you for using the wrong spoon, if spoons were a thing. The rules feel like a trap. You're supposed to eat slowly, but not too slowly, or you're hogging the dish. Lean forward, but not too far, or you're greedy. You notice the host watching, his smile sharp as a gladius. He's not just feeding you, he's testing you. Will you respect the unspoken script? You take a cautious bite of bread, avoiding the communal bowl of sauce everyone's dipping into. One guy dives in with 3 fingers, and the table freezes. He's a freedman, trying too hard to fit in, and now he's marked as an outsider. You wince, knowing that could have been you. This stagecraft isn't just for show. It's how Rome's elite kept control. A well-run feast proved the host's dominance, his ability to orchestrate chaos into order. You see it in the slaves' precise movements, the guests' forced laughter, the way even the lamps are angled to spotlight the host. It's like a modern CEO hosting a gala, but with more togas and fewer selfies. Joke 2. Imagine a Roman Yelp review. Great peacock, but the host's ego blocked the sun. The table's a microcosm of the empire. Everyone's playing their role, or they're out. You're starting to get it. Every rule, from how you hold your cup to who speaks first, reinforces the hierarchy. The host's wife, draped in silk, barely eats, her restraint a signal of refinement. You, meanwhile, are sweating not to spill wine on your tunic. A guest brags about his new villa, and the host tops it with a tale of his bigger one. It's not conversation, it's combat. You realize the table's a mirror of Rome itself, where power isn't just wealth or title, but how well you perform under pressure. You take a sip, praying you don't choke, and hope you survive this act. You're still wedged on that triclinium couch, the Roman dining room buzzing with clinking cups and calculated laughs. The food on your plate, lentils for you, juicy boar for the bigwigs, tells a story louder than the host's booming voice. In Rome, what you eat and how you eat it isn't about hunger. It's about where you stand in the empire's brutal pecking order. The table's a map of society, and you're stuck in the cheap seats, trying not to drop your bread. The mainstream fact is that food choices in Rome were a deliberate signal of class, as seen in Pliny's letters describing elite feasts. Senators got rare peacock. Plebs like you made do with porridge or scraps. A quirky tidbit? Some Romans thought eating cabbage prevented drunkenness, so they'd chomp it before a wine-heavy night. Historians still argue whether this was folk wisdom or just wishful thinking. You're eyeing the cabbage now, wondering if it's worth a try. You notice the spread on the table, a blatant display of rank. The host and his cronies get glistening oysters and spiced dormice, while you're handed a bowl of gritty spelt. It's not just portion size. Your food's cheaper, tougher, less exotic. You chew slowly, mimicking the elite, but the lentils stick in your throat. Across the room, A senator waves off a dish of figs, a power move showing he's above needing to eat. You, meanwhile, can't afford to refuse anything. It's like a modern office party where the boss gets steak and you're stuck with stale crackers. Joke 1. Bet the Romans invented hangry when plebs got stuck with moldy bread. The hierarchy's baked into every bite. Slaves weave through the room, serving the high-status guests first. You wait, your stomach growling, as the host's cousin gets a second helping of boar. The rules dictate you can't ask for more. That's for the elite to decide. You glance at a freedman nearby who's trying to eat daintily but keeps slipping. He's got a better plate than you, but his awkwardness screams outsider. In Rome, food wasn't just fuel, it was a weapon. The elite used lavish dishes to dazzle allies and shame rivals, while you're reminded to know your place. You're starting to see how deep this goes. Even the ingredients tell the story. The rich import pepper from India, a spice worth more than your yearly wage, while you're stuck with local herbs. Garum, that fishy sauce everyone loves, comes in grades. The host gets the premium stuff. You get the budget version that tastes like low tide. It's not just about taste, it's about power. The elite could afford to waste food, tossing half-eaten delicacies to slaves or dogs, while you're scraping your plate. Joke 2. Imagine a Roman potluck. Your lentils wouldn't even make the table. The social ladder shapes every moment. You notice a guest, a minor official, angling for a better seat by flattering the host. It works. He's offered a slice of pheasant. You, however, stay quiet, knowing one wrong word could demote you to worse than lentils. The table's a battlefield, and food's the ammunition. Even the poor outside, begging for scraps, follow this code, hoping for a crust from a generous senator. It's like today's influencer culture, where the right meal gets you clout, but one bad post tanks you. You take a cautious sip of watery wine, praying you don't spill, and realize survival here means playing the game. Whether you're hungry or not, you're still sprawled on that triclinium couch. The Roman dining room, a swirl of clattering dishes and sly glances. The feast is in full swing, but it's chaos barely held together by ironclad rules. Every guest, from the smug senator to the nervous freedman, follows a script of etiquette that feels like a leash. These dining laws aren't just about looking polished, they're about control, keeping the wild energy of a Roman banquet from spiraling into a brawl, or, worse, a rebellion. The mainstream fact is that Roman dining etiquette, as described in sources like Marshall's epigrams, was designed to maintain order. Rules dictated who ate first, how much, and even how to sit. Left elbow down, no slouching. a quirky tidbit? Some Romans believed a sneeze at the table was a bad omen, so they'd pause the meal to appease the gods. Historians still argue whether these rituals were about superstition or just another way to flex authority. You're hoping nobody sneezes now. You're starving. You feel the tension in the room. The host, lounging like a king, signals for the next course, and slaves dart in with platters of boar and figs. You're still nibbling lentils, waiting your turn, because grabbing food out of order is a scandal. The rules are relentless. Eat with 2 fingers, sip, don't gulp, and never interrupt the host's story about his new villa. You try to keep up, but it's like juggling knives. One guest, a bit too tipsy, laughs at the wrong moment and gets a glare that could melt bronze. You wince, knowing that's a social death sentence. Joke 1. Bet they'd banish you for double dipping in the garum. These laws keep the feast from chaos. Without them, the room's mix of egos, senators, merchants, wannabe poets would erupt. You notice how the host uses etiquette like a whip. He offers a choice cut to a loyal ally, skips a rival, and tosses you a measly olive. It's deliberate, a reminder of who holds the reins. The slaves move like clockwork, refilling cups in strict order of status. Even they're part of the script, their silence louder than any speech. It's like a modern state dinner, but with more togas and fewer forks. Joke 2. Imagine a Roman timeout corner for bad table manners. You're starting to see the genius of it. The rules don't just prevent fights, they reinforce the pecking order. A freedman tries to mimic the senator's dainty eating style, but fumbles, spilling wine. The table snickers, and he shrinks. You're careful, pinching your bread just right, but the pressure's exhausting. The host's wife, barely eating, watches everyone like a hawk, her restraint a power move. Even the food's presentation, exotic dishes for the elite, scraps for you, keeps the hierarchy crystal clear. It's control disguised as courtesy, and you're just trying not to choke on it. The system's brutal but effective. By dictating every move, the elite keep the room in check, turning a meal into a loyalty test. You recall that dormouse from earlier. Eating it wasn't just about taste, it was about proving you'd play along. A guest brags about his trade deals, but the host tops it, and the room falls in line. You sip your watery wine, careful not to spill, and realize this isn't a party. It's a machine, oiled by etiquette, grinding everyone into their place. Joke 3. Think Romans ever forgot the rules and just ate like normal people? Nah, too risky. You're still propped on that triclinium couch. The Roman dining room aglow with oil lamps and simmering ambition. The feast has hit its peak, and the senators at the head of the table are putting on a show. Their platters overflow with rare delicacies, peacock tongues, flamingo brains, while you're still picking at lentils. These lavish displays aren't just about indulgence. They're a flex, a dazzling reminder of wealth and influence that keeps everyone else in awe and in line. The mainstream fact is that Roman elites used banquets to showcase power, as Seneca's writings confirm, with hosts spending fortunes on exotic foods to impress allies and intimidate rivals. A quirky tidbit: some senators serve dishes dyed blue or gold, not to eat, but to flaunt their wealth. Edible art for clout. Historians still argue whether these feasts were about genuine hospitality or just propaganda. You're leaning toward the latter, watching the host grin as a guest gawks at his gilded figs. You feel the room's energy shift. The host, his toga draped just so, gestures grandly as slaves parade in with a whole roasted boar, its tusks still gleaming. The crowd murmurs, impressed, and you can't help but stare. It's not just food, it's a statement. The senator next to him brags about importing oysters from Britannia, each one costing more than your monthly rent. You're stuck with a bowl of barley, and the contrast stings. It's like scrolling past a billionaire's yacht on social media while you're eating instant noodles. Joke 1. Bet they'd Instagram their peacock platter with hashtag blessed. The excess is staggering. You watch a guest, a pompous magistrate, casually toss half his portion to a slave, who scurries off with it. The waste is deliberate, proof he can afford to throw away what you'd kill for. The host tops it, offering his favorite ally a dish of lark tongues, a delicacy so rare it's basically myth. You're trying to eat your barley without looking desperate, but the rules, 2 fingers, no slurping, make it a chore. A freedman nearby tries to join the bragging, mentioning his new shop, but the senators ignore him. He's outclassed, and the table knows it. You're catching the strategy now. These feasts aren't about feeding people. They're about dazzling them. The host's wealth, shown in every over-the-top dish, buys loyalty and silence. You notice how the guests hang on his every word, laughing too hard at his bad jokes. It's not friendship, it's survival. Even the slaves, moving like shadows, are props in this theater of power. You recall that dormouse from earlier. Eating it was your ticket to this show. But now you see the real cost. Joke 2. Think they ever ran out of flamingo brains and had to serve chicken? Scandalous. The display's working. A minor official, hoping for a promotion, flatters the host, praising his divine taste in wine. The host smirks, offering him a sip from his own cup. A rare honor. You're invisible, your barley growing cold, but you're learning. These banquets are Rome's ultimate power move, where wealth turns into influence and influence into control. It's like a modern gala where the VIPs sip champagne while you're stuck with tap water. You take a cautious bite, praying you don't spill, and realize you're not just eating, you're witnessing an empire flex its muscles, one ostentatious dish at a time. Joke 3. Imagine the cleanup. Slaves probably cursed those gold-dyed leftovers. You're still lounging in that triclinium, the Roman dining room, a haze of wine fumes and flickering lamps. The feast hums along, but your eyes drift to the women at the table, fewer, quieter, and held to tighter rules than the men. Their presence feels like an afterthought, their plates smaller, their gestures more restrained. In Rome, dining etiquette for women wasn't just about manners. It was about keeping them in their place, their every move a reminder of the empire's iron grip on gender. The mainstream fact is that Roman women faced stricter dining rules than men, as noted in texts like those of Tacitus, often relegated to lower status seats or separate rooms to signal their subordination. A quirky tidbit: some women were banned from reclining like men, forced to sit upright to show modesty, a rule conveniently ignored for elite hostesses. Historians still argue whether these restrictions were about moral control or just another way to flaunt male dominance. You're betting on both, watching a woman across the table pick at her food like it's a test. You notice the host's wife, draped in silk, barely touching her plate of figs. She's reclining, a rare privilege, but her movements are precise, her laughter soft, as if she's under a spotlight. The other women, wives of lesser men, sit stiffly on chairs, their portions meager. Bread, maybe an olive. You're still chewing your lentils, but you feel the difference. Men like the senator next to you sprawl, grabbing boar with greasy fingers, while the women can't even reach for the communal sauce without a glance of disapproval. It's like a modern dinner where the guys hog the steak and the women get stuck with salad. Joke 1. Bet the women wished they could yeet their chairs and recline too. The rules are suffocating. Women can't speak unless spoken to, and their eating is performative. Small bites, no wine unless offered. You see a young woman hesitate before taking a sip, waiting for her husband's nod. It's not just etiquette, it's control. The host's wife, though, plays the game better. She compliments the food, just loud enough to seem gracious, but never oversteps. You recall that dormouse from earlier. Nobody offered her one. Women's dining was less about nourishment and more about proving they knew their role in Rome's hierarchy. You're starting to get it. These restrictions weren't random. They were pillars of a system where men held the power. A woman eating immodestly could spark gossip, even ruin her family's reputation. You notice a guest's daughter, barely touching her bread, her eyes downcast. She's learning early. The men, meanwhile, boast and belch, their sloppiness a privilege. It's like today's double standards, where a woman's judged for what she eats, while guys get a free pass. Joke 2. Imagine a Roman women's lib meeting. First rule, grab the good wine. The table's a stage, and women are supporting actors. Even the slaves, mostly male, serve men first, leaving women to wait. You see the host's wife catch a guest staring too long. She shoots him a look that could curdle garum, and he backs off. She's powerful, but only within the rules. You take a sip of your watery wine, careful not to spill, and realize this feast isn't just about class. It's about gender, too. Women's restrictions kept Rome's patriarchy humming. Every bite a reminder of who really ran the show. Joke 3. Think women ever snuck extra figs in protest? Quiet rebellion, Roman style. You're still on that triclinium couch, the Roman dining room, alive with clinking goblets and forced laughter. Your eyes shift to the slaves weaving through the crowd, their steps silent, their faces blank. They're the backbone of this feast, serving, cleaning, and dodging the whims of drunk senators, yet they're barely acknowledged. In Rome, slaves at the table weren't just workers. They balanced grueling service with subtle defiance, navigating a world where every move could mean reward or punishment. The mainstream fact is that slaves were essential to Roman banquets. As Apicius's recipes imply, managing complex dishes and strict service protocols to keep feasts flawless. A quirky tidbit: some slaves were trained to memorize guests' names and preferences, acting as living notepads to boost the host's ego. Historians still argue whether slaves' subtle rebellions, like accidentally spilling wine, were common or exaggerated by elite paranoia. You're watching one now, wondering if his slow pour is intentional. You see a slave, barely older than you, glide past with a tray of oysters. His eyes don't meet anyone's, but his hands are steady, placing the dish before the host with precision. The senator grabs an oyster, barely noticing the man who served it. You're still picking at your lentils, but you notice the slave's slight pause as he passes a loud guest who's been barking orders. Is that a smirk? It's gone in a flash, but it's there. Slaves had to follow the same etiquette as guests: silent, efficient, invisible. But they found ways to push back. Joke 1. Bet they dreamed of serving garum in the senator's sandal. The rules for slaves are brutal. They serve in strict order, elite first, you last. And any mistake, like dropping a cup, could mean a beating. You watch another slave, a woman, refill wine with mechanical grace, even as a guest snaps at her for being slow. She doesn't flinch, but you catch her fingers tighten on the jug. The host depends on them to make his feast shine. Yet they're props, not people. It's like modern service workers, smiling through rude customers, but with higher stakes. You recall that dormouse from earlier. Slaves probably caught and cooked it, yet they'll never taste it. You're starting to see their quiet power. A slave lingers near a chatty freedman, overhearing trade secrets that could fetch a price later. Another accidentally nudges a guest's elbow, spilling a drop of wine. The guest laughs it off, but the slave's eyes glint. These acts are small, but in a world where they own nothing, they're huge. The table's a stage, and slaves play their part perfectly, too perfectly sometimes. It's like today's gig workers gaming the system, just with togas and worse odds. Joke 2. Imagine a slave, Yelp review. Great feast, but the whip was a vibe killer. The host doesn't notice, too busy boasting about his new villa. But you do. The slaves keep this machine running, their labor making the elite look effortless. You take a sip of your watery wine, careful not to signal for a refill. Don't want to test that woman's patience. Their defiance, however small, is a reminder. Even in Rome's rigid hierarchy, the powerless find ways to resist. You chew your lentils, wondering what stories these slaves could tell if they weren't bound by silence. Joke 3. Think they ever swapped the host's wine for vinegar? Bet it happened at least once. You're still sprawled on that triclinium couch. The Roman dining room, thick with the scent of roasted meat and murmured flattery. The feast feels like a carefully rehearsed play, but beneath the polished etiquette, there's a weird undercurrent, strange rituals and whispered superstitions that make you double-check your wine for curses. In Rome, dining wasn't just about power. It was steeped in quirky beliefs that shaped every bite, turning the table into a minefield of divine do's and don'ts. The mainstream fact is that Roman dining was laced with religious rituals, as seen in Ovid's writings, with offerings to household gods like the lares to ensure a blessed meal. A quirky tidbit: some Romans thought eating lettuce could make you sleepy, so they'd avoid it at feasts to stay sharp. Historians still argue whether these superstitions were heartfelt or just social posturing to seem pious. You're eyeing your plate now, wondering if that cabbage is secretly a snooze fest. You notice the host pour a few drops of wine onto the floor, muttering a prayer. It's not a spill. It's an offering to appease the gods. Everyone nods, but you're half convinced it's just for show. The rules are wild. Don't start eating until the host does, or you'll jinx the meal. A guest sneezes, and the table freezes, someone whispering about bad omens. You're trying to eat your lentils without offending any deities, but it's like navigating a cosmic obstacle course. Joke 1. Bet they blamed the gods when the garum went bad. These beliefs aren't just quirks, they're control. The host uses them to set the tone, his prayers signaling he's not just rich, but divinely favored. You see a slave sprinkle salt around the table, another ritual to ward off evil spirits. It's oddly comforting, but you wonder if the slaves believe it or just follow orders. A woman across the room refuses a dish of eggs, citing a dream about owls. Bad luck, apparently. You recall that dormouse from earlier. Nobody mentioned if it was cursed, but you're not asking. It's like modern superstitions, avoiding black cats, but with higher stakes and worse food. Joke 2. Imagine a Roman horoscope. Leo, beware the cursed olives today. You're starting to see how these rituals glue the feast together. They give the chaos a structure, a shared code that keeps everyone in line. The senator next to you avoids mixing fish and meat, muttering about disharmony. Is he devout or just flexing his knowledge? You're not sure, but you mimic him, skipping the fishy garum. The table's a stage, and superstitions are part of the script, reinforcing the host's authority. If he says the gods demand no lettuce, you'd better comply. It's like today's wellness fads. Drink kale juice for balance, or else. The weirdest part, these beliefs shape even the smallest moves. You notice guests avoiding the table's corners, supposedly haunted by spirits. A freedman spills salt and tosses a pinch over his shoulder, earning a nod from the host. You're careful with your bread, remembering someone said. Dropping it invites famine. The room hums with these invisible rules, and you're just trying to keep up. You take a sip of your watery wine, praying it's not hexed, and realize this feast isn't just about power. It's about fear, too, of gods, omens, and the chaos they might unleash. Joke 3. Think they ever blamed a bad party on Mercury retrograde? Probably. You're still slumped on that triclinium couch. The Roman dining room, a swirl of flickering lamps and strained smiles. The feast is winding down, but the tension's spiking. Every guest is hyper-aware of the etiquette minefield. One wrong move, like grabbing an extra fig or laughing too loudly, could bring more than dirty looks. In Rome, breaking dining rules wasn't just a faux pas. It could cost you your reputation, your alliances, or worse. The punishments for missteps were as brutal as the hierarchy they protected. The mainstream fact is that Roman society enforced dining etiquette with harsh social penalties, as Juvenal's satires reveal, where a single blunder could mark you as an outcast. A quirky tidbit: some hosts kept etiquette spies, slaves trained to report guests' mistakes, like using the wrong hand to eat. Historians still argue whether these punishments were about maintaining order or just elite sadism. You're watching your fingers now, praying you don't dip into the garum wrong. You feel the room's eyes on you. A freedman across the table, too eager, grabs a peach before the host. The silence is deafening. The host's smile tightens, and the freedman's face pales as whispers ripple. He's done, socially exiled before dessert. You're still chewing your lentils, heart pounding, because you almost made the same mistake. The rules are a trap. Eat too fast, you're greedy. Too slow, you're ungrateful. You recall that dormouse from earlier. Eating it was a test, but spitting it out would have been a disaster. It's like a modern dinner party where one bad toast gets you blacklisted. Joke 1. Bet they had a Roman equivalent of canceled for bad table manners. The punishments sting. A senator nearby mutters about a rival who was snubbed from every feast after spilling wine on a host's toga. It wasn't the stain, it was the disrespect. You see a guest, a minor official, hesitate before speaking, then stay silent. He knows one wrong word could demote him to the pleb table next time. The host's wife, ever watchful, notes every slip. You're trying to sip your watery wine without slurping, but it's like diffusing a bomb. A slave hovers nearby, and you wonder if he's one of those spies, ready to rat you out for a crumb on your tunic. You're getting the picture. These penalties, shunning, mockery, lost invitations, kept Rome's hierarchy ironclad. The elite didn't need swords. They had etiquette. A guest brags too loudly, and the host cuts him off with a pointed joke. The room laughs, but it's a warning. You notice the slaves, too. Move with extra care now. Knowing a spilled tray could mean a whip. It's like today's social media pile-ons, but with togas and no delete button. Joke 2. Imagine a Roman group chat blowing up over someone's bad fork game. Oh wait, no forks. The stakes feel personal. You're a nobody here, and one misstep could lock you out of these circles forever. You see the freedman try to recover, offering a weak compliment, but the host ignores him. The table's a courtroom, and etiquette's the law. You chew slowly, avoiding the communal sauce, and realize this isn't about food, it's about survival. The punishments, harsh as they are, keep everyone in line, from senators to slaves. You take a cautious bite, hoping you've dodged the spotlight, and brace for the feast's final act. Joke 3. Think they ever let someone off for a small spill? Nah, Rome didn't do mercy. You're still on that triclinium couch, the Roman dining room now quieter, the lamps burning low. The feast is nearly over, and you're exhausted from dodging etiquette traps. As you pick at the last of your lentils, you start to see how these rigid dining rules, born in Rome's power-obsessed heart, left a mark that echoes even today. The table was a stage for control, but its lessons shaped manners far beyond the empire's fall, whispering through time to our own dinner tables. The mainstream fact is that Roman dining etiquette influenced Western table manners, with practices like structured courses and host-led toasts appearing in medieval and modern traditions. A quirky tidbit: Romans avoided eating with their left hand, a taboo that lingered in European etiquette as a sign of civility. Historians still argue whether Rome's rules directly shaped our customs or just reflected universal human instincts for order. You're wondering if your two-finger bread grab would pass muster at a modern dinner party. You look around the triclinium, its hierarchy still stark. The host, smug as ever, raises his goblet, and everyone follows, mirroring his pace, his posture. It's not just respect, it's submission, baked into every rule. You recall that dormouse from earlier, how eating it proved your loyalty. That power dynamic lives on. Think of today's formal dinners. The host decides when to start, who gets the best seat, even the vibe. You've been to parties where one wrong move, like grabbing the last shrimp, gets you side-eyed. Rome's ghost is in those moments, its obsession with control still shaping how we eat together. Joke 1. Bet your grandma's no elbows on the table rule came straight from a toga-wearing snob. The legacy's deeper than manners. Rome's dining rules were about signaling status, and we still play that game. You see it in Michelin star restaurants, where tiny portions scream wealth, or in how we judge someone's class by their wine choice. The senator's peacock platter isn't gone. It's just a $200 steak now. You notice the slaves clearing plates, their silence a reminder of who really propped up Rome's grandeur. Today's waiters, hustling for tips, carry that shadow, their labor making our meals look effortless. It's like scrolling Instagram. Everyone's curating their image, but someone's always serving. Joke 2. Imagine Romans at a buffet. Total chaos. No rules. Just garum everywhere. You're starting to feel the weight of it. Rome's dining laws weren't just about food. They were about power, fear, and fitting in. That pressure's still here in how we obsess over proper etiquette or stress about impressing the boss at a work dinner. You sip your watery wine, careful not to slurp, and realize the triclinium never really vanished. It's in every social game we play, every meal where we're watched, judged, or trying to prove we belong. The rules have softened, but the stakes haven't. You chew your last lentil, grateful to have survived this feast, and wonder how many modern meals carry Rome's DNA. As the lamps dim, the room grows softer, the chatter fading to a hum. You're sinking into the couch, the weight of the night settling like a warm blanket. The host's voice, once sharp, now drones, lulling you. The table's rules, so rigid, start to blur, and you imagine simpler meals, bread shared without fear, laughter without calculation. Your eyelids droop, the triclinium dissolving into shadow. Let the empire's games fade. You're safe here, drifting on the hum of a fan, the night wrapping you gently. Sleep calls, whispering peace, and you slip toward dreams where no one counts your bites.